I know that John has been very influential on Penn's thoughts on the philosophy of set theory through her career, and that there've been some very interesting interaction between the two of them as philosophers and in set theory. Indeed, when I first visited here in 2017, this is the main thing that Penn and I spent a lot of time talking about was John's thoughts on the multiverse, and we spent a lot of time talking about that, and that eventually became a paper, which is out in the BSL, I believe, at the moment, and is also part of the subject of this talk. So today we have John talking today on some remarks on a multiverse language.
Okay, thanks, Toby. Thanks for the invitation to contribute to this series. It's an honor and a pleasure. I don't know if Penn remembers, but we first crossed paths, I think 50 years ago in Vaught's metamathematics course. And John Burgess was there too.
I certainly remember.
Okay. We didn't actually talk then, as I remember, but we did then really meet in the 80s. She was working on her papers, Believing the Axioms. I was one of a tribe of people she had trained her naturalist's eye upon. We're both interested in the epistemology of set theory very much. I think that there's some really juicy problems there, and a place where philosophy can contribute to mathematical progress. We've communicated many times since. And you'll see that later on we have some interactions coming up in this talk. Okay, now let me see if I can figure out how to go forward from here. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to discuss 3 papers. The first 2 are semi-philosophical. As you can guess from the title of the last one, it's not philosophical. But there's an essay at the beginning that's meant for a general audience, so you don't have to be a technical set theorist to read it, to that essay. The plan is I'll begin with some philosophical generalities, move on to a epistemological principle called maximize that I think guides a lot of the development of modern set theory. We'll see sort of what it's led to within set theory, up the large cardinal hierarchy, actually. Then we'll come to a place where it seems to give out. It's called the Lévy-Solovay boundary. And we'll entertain the idea that at that point you reach a meaning indeterminacy. And we'll see a potential way of cutting back the language of set theory so as to maybe avoid that indeterminacy. That's the multiverse language. Then we'll see that even within that language, there's an indeterminacy. What's the core of the multiverse look like? And we'll then look at a further, I would say, fleshing out of the meaning, which is a definite proposal as to what how to remove that last chunk of meaning indeterminacy. And we'll see some motivations for it and some big open problems associated to it. Okay, so let's start with some general philosophy. These are things that probably many of us, and I think Penn and I agree on pretty much all of this, and it's not meant as an argument or anything. So naturalism, the naturalist slogan can be taken as no first philosophy, no radical rebuilding projects. One of my favorite quotes in philosophy is the Neurath one, which I think everybody knows. Then one can go on, the holism, no first anything. Languages gain meaning and theories are confirmed as a whole. In our context, mathematical theories, sort of at the boundary, this means that we have an emphasis on what's called extrinsic evidence, the way your theory fits into our theory of everything, rather than what's called intrinsic evidence, which perhaps you could slander as what makes you feel comfortable. That's a slander, but at any rate, holism emphasizes the extrinsic kind of evidence in our context. Okay, another principle of naturalist epistemology is that one should analyze what's worked in the past and use it as a guide to what might work in the future. Now, if you think about mathematics, it goes back to prehistory. In fact, I discovered looking at Wikipedia that people were counting finite sets 70,000 years ago. I think that's, I trust Wikipedia. So there's a lot of mathematical thought, and you can study it from many angles. Our focus is on recent mathematical thought. And there, language and theory are the appropriate focus. So for the epistemology of set theory. And recent developments, recent meaning in the last 100 years, do raise philosophical questions. Language and theory or conceptual systems belong primarily to social groups, not individuals. So the part of philosophy of knowledge that talks about sort of ethics of individual belief is, seems to me, is not quite relevant. And so another aspect of that, self-evidence is too individual dependent to count for much. We can make things self-evident to our artificial intelligence successors by just programming it into them, and we probably will. Okay, so it's today's extrinsic evidence leads to tomorrow's self-evidence. A final point is that mathematics is ahead of the rest of the science in the degree to which its language and theory have been made clear and explicit. That's its glory. It's been formalized. Metamathematics then becomes possible. You can study the mathematical theory you have as an object with mathematical, and study it with mathematical rigor. And this kind of study is essential to the epistemology of set theory. Okay, now on to more philosophical theses. There's the indispensability argument, which I need to say something about that. Okay, you can, again, maybe slander it by summarizing it as mathematics is essential to the rest of science, so let's not dispense with it. Agree with that. Pure mathematics is inseparable from the rest. Sometimes Penn seems to write as if it was. I don't see that at all. And Gödel's second incompleteness theorem is a definitive proof that in principle, it will never be separable. Okay, so let's not dispense with pure mathematics. Going further, powerful unifying principles are preferable to good enough for now. So I think John Burgess in his paper wrote something about how the indispensability argument concedes too much. It's sort of delivered in the spirit of, oh, you got to take your medicine. In fact, powerful unifying principles are what people look for in science and mathematics. In our context, we found some, but there are many basic unsolved problems regarding them. And given that, we should try to continue to develop those concepts and their consequences, regardless of applications in other parts of science. Now you can say, oh, wait a minute, from a practical point of view, oh, you're just getting out ahead of yourselves. You've gone so far away from applications that what you're doing may be just time wasting. But in fact, we haven't sort of left all connection. Well, that's not what I say. In fact, what we've found in an important sense is that all the ways we have to strengthen ZFC are consistent with one another. That is, they lead to a common theory of the concrete objects, natural numbers and real numbers. Okay, so they're not sort of just going off in different directions. And we'll see that. Okay, given that, this is more evidence that one should investigate him further. There's something there to investigate. Okay. Uh-oh, let's see. My forward thing is not working.
Try to click outside of the text box.
Yeah. Okay, I clicked outside the text box. Oh, darn it. Okay, let's see. Whoop. Okay, let me try now. Yay. Okay, thank you. Okay, last general philosophical area, which is, I think, a place where Maddie and Meadows and I have some disagreements, is meaning skepticism. So let me just start by conceding that in the context of new axioms, it can be difficult to distinguish sharpening the meaning of your language from discovering a new truth. And Quine famously criticized Carnap and the positivists for sort of laying all mathematical knowledge on the altar of truth and virtue of the meaning, and it's just too simplistic. Doesn't there's not a sharp distinction there. Okay, one could admit that, I think. So it's hard to tell, but it doesn't mean that the concept is not useful. Oh, it happened again. There we go. Okay, in fact, Quine himself makes use of the notion of meaning. When he's trying to do something positive, his criterion for ontological commitment, that you're committed to the number 5 because you said that 5 exists. Well, there's the say that, which has got meaning built into it. His famous rejection of set theory is stronger than ZFC. All else is uninterpreted syntax. There's that word uninterpreted. Moreover, philosophers have written a lot about theories of meaning because I think they keep being drawn to it. The subject's called analytic philosophy. In our situation, the objects of interest for us in epistemology of set theory are interpreted theories, not just formal systems. How they're interpreted and how they're translated into one another is important. In real life, we do make translations, and they can be good or bad. I would say that preset theoretic mathematics has been translated into the language of set theory. Our language is universal in that we can translate all of what the earlier people said into our language. And the final point is that don't need to have a theory of a notion in order to employ it. I should see, let's just see whether it takes us somewhere. Okay, so now let's employ it. And that's with the principle maximus. Let's let LST be the language of set theory that we currently assign to that syntax. The language of set theory is universal in the sense that all mathematical language of the past and the present can be translated into the language of set theory. On the other hand, our formal theory, ZFC, is incomplete. So LST is semantically complete, but the theory ZFC is proof theoretically incomplete. That's what puts us in business as set theorists. Okay, so the I would say the key methodological maxim that epistemology can contribute to the search for a stronger foundation in mathematics is maximize interpretive power. That is, we want a foundational language and theory that will enable us to say as much as possible as efficiently as possible. Okay, now there's another sort of tradition with maximize that's actually more prevalent, I think. So maximize is more often taken to apply to the sets themselves. That is, there are as many sets as possible. It's the slogan in various forms. And that intuition has led to many of the large cardinal hypotheses. So the intuition that the V alphas go on as long as possible is behind many of the large cardinal hypotheses. But it seems to, if you put things that way, it seems to just muddy things once you get to the present. So for example, maximizing the reals was once taken as an argument against CH. And you want more of them than just aleph 1. But you can also think of the CH as saying that there are more well-orderings of the reals than the person who had not CH was saying. So who has more sets than the other, it doesn't really make sense. Forcing axioms are motivated by the idea that we're going to have more sets by having more generic objects. But again, I think you could just say you have fewer partial orders. Okay, here's a statement of maximize due to Maddie, one of her earlier non-formal statements of it. She's written a lot about it, as we all know. Okay, the set theoretic arena in which mathematics is to be modeled should be as generous as possible. The set theoretic axioms from which mathematical theorems are to be proved should be as powerful and fruitful as possible. This desire to found mathematics without encumbering it generates the set theoretic maxim I call maximize. Okay, I would say I agree with what comes after the first semicolon. So there are two clauses. The arena being modeled, being generous, that's in the direction of maximizing the sets themselves. The axioms, which the theorems prove powerful and fruitful, that's in the maximizing the theory, the interpretive power of the theory. So I agree with this, what's after the semicolon. There were a number of attempts to formalize this. I don't think they worked, the completely formal ones. And again, at some point, I think she said that, well, perhaps the informal criterion is what we ought to be shooting for. And I think I agree with that. I think the first clause has problems, and that's in the maximizing objects part. Here's some problems. Well, it seems to lead to scholanism. Every set can be countable. For any set, we can make it countable, whatever that means. So when you start mixing meta-language and language, you get into things like that. And it just leads to confusion. As I said, you can look at the forcing axiom as maximizing or minimizing. On a more general level, when you talk about the ontology of a theory, you're quantifying into a modal context. The theory is related to its ontology by your intentions or its meaning. When you compare the ontology of T to that of S, the first thing you need to do is translate the language of T into the language of S. But that's where the action is. So the remainder, in comparing ontologies, I don't think it is a good approach. Especially since a good translation doesn't have to map referring expressions to referring expressions. So if you regard something as a theory of a generic extension of your universe, those sets, their referring expressions don't correspond to yours. Okay, another thing that should give pause. The other great principle of unify clearly doesn't apply to objects, it applies to theories. So shouldn't its companion maximize do so as well? Okay, so I take the morals for this to avoid premature ontologizing. And as a slogan, maximize is a principle of rationality, not a law of nature. It belongs to epistemology, not ontology. Okay, so where does maximizing interpretive power, how does that get any real meat to it in our context language of set theory? Our set theories, our potential extensions of ZFC can be interpreted in one another. And that leads to something called the consistency strength hierarchy. So given T and U axiomatized theories extending ZFC, we say T less than or equal to con U, consistent relative to U, if and only if ZFC proves that con U implies con T. Usually Peano arithmetic proves that. Okay, so we say that, so if T is consistent relative to U and vice versa, then we say T and U are equiconsistent, have the same consistency strength. Okay, so there's a interpretability ordering. This is actually a formal ordering, but its structure on arbitrary axiomatized theories is a complete mess. The theories which have set theoretic ideas to them, it turns out, are very nicely ordered by this relation. Okay, now large cardinal hypotheses play a special role in understanding that interpretation order. You can think of them as our source of interpretive power. They play a special role. Many natural extensions T of ZFC have been shown consistent relative to some large cardinal hypothesis H by the method of forcing. This method is so powerful that at the moment we know of no interesting theories, ones with a set theoretic idea to them, which seem to be unlikely to be provably consistent relative to some large cardinal or other by forcing. Of course, there are many open problems. I think there's something involved, a famous one involving Janssen cardinals. It seems like it should be consistent. We don't know how to prove it. But the method's been very successful, and we just don't feel like there's a need for a new method. So the extensions of ZSC via large cardinal hypotheses seem to be cofinal in the part of the consistency strength order on extensions of ZFC that we know about. These days, the way a set theorist convinces people that T is consistent, which is certainly necessary in order to be meaningful, is to show by forcing that it's consistent relative to some large cardinal hypothesis. So that's the sense in which they're the source of interpretive power. People look at at things that you could add to the proper forcing axiom or Martin's maximum and so on. I don't think that they would feel comfortable unless they could prove those things consistent relative to some large cardinal or other. Okay. Now, what evidence do we have that the large cardinals are consistent? We reduce everything to that. What evidence do we have? Well, I think we do have good evidence for even the very strong ones like rank-to-rank embeddings. In all cases, the evidence amounts in the end to the existence of a coherent theory in which the hypothesis plays a central role. A theory that extends in a natural way the theory we obtain from weaker hypotheses. Now, where we have at the large cardinal levels, where we have intermodal theory, it provides the strongest kind of evidence along these lines. You get an exhaustive, detailed account of a minimal universe in which the large cardinal hypothesis holds. So you have sort of a constructive analysis of its content, to the extent that you could give a constructive analysis of something that is so highly non-constructive. Okay, and of this exhaustive, detailed account, if you can embed your hypothesis in that, and it does play a central role in the theory of that universe, then that's evidence that it's consistent. Okay, now a phenomenon is that the natural theories extending ZFC, ones that have some set theoretic idea to them, are well ordered by consistency strength, or pretty well ordered by consistency strength. That is, if T is a natural extension, then and in fact, their places in the consistency strength hierarchy are marked by large cardinals. So if T is a natural extension of ZFC, then there's an extension H that's axiomatized by large cardinal hypothesis such that T is equiconsistent with H. The consistency strength order is a pretty well order of the natural extensions. In particular, if T and U are natural extensions, one is consistent relative to the other. The way we show this is important too. So if T is a natural theory, then and H is the large cardinal hypothesis that we're comparing it to, we show that T is consistent relative to H by the method of forcing. As we start with a model of H and produce a generic extension satisfying T. We show that H is consistent relative to T by intermodal theory. That is, we use T to construct a canonical intermodal, one of these exhaustively detailed things that represents the minimum content of H. So we obtain a universe where the minimum content of H is realized from T. Okay, it's important to say this is a phenomenon, not a theorem. Natural is not a formal term. It is a pattern that many theorems have. So there are many theorems along these lines, but there are also many open questions, and some of them are pretty fundamental, especially those in intermodal theory. So, for intermodal theory, B is always done by intermodal theory. You construct the model with the large cardinal by intermodal theory. Well, our model construction methods at the moment only reach middling large cardinal levels. So we don't have examples of B that are non-trivial anywhere past many wooden cardinals. So calling this a pattern is betting on the come to some extent, especially in the case of intermodal theory. Okay, now it's consistency strengths are pretty well ordered, but more than that. The set theory is consistent just in case all of its pi01 consequences of the form for every natural number something algorithmically checkable happens. All those very elementary consequences are true. So consistency says your most elementary consequences are true. Remarkably, if we climb the consistency strength hierarchy in a natural way, we seem to decide uniquely not just the pi01 sentences, but the more complicated ones about the concrete objects as well. Concrete here refers to natural numbers, real numbers, and certain sets of real numbers. We'll see later that the sets and questions are what have been identified. They're the Hom infinity sets. That will come later. Okay, so as Maddie and Meadows put it in their BSL article, as natural theories proceed up the large cardinal hierarchy in consistency strength, they in fact agree on an ever-increasing class of mathematical statements. And I would add of ever-increasing complexity. Okay, now in the instance of interests of time, let me leave it there. Our theory of the concrete has statements about natural numbers, statements in the language of second-order arithmetic. It leads to one road upward in terms of the consequences. Now, there's a partial explanation of this pattern, and it has to do with the way we obtain models and hence independence theorems. Our models producing methods lead to eventual monotonicity at some complexity level gamma, because in order to produce a model for a theory T that is sufficiently strong with respect to gamma, we have to produce a gamma correct model. So to go between models at a very high consistency strength, the two models will agree on gamma statements, because in each case, the model's gamma correct from the point of view of the other one. There's a metamathematical indicator that's a formal theorem that one can prove along these lines, and it's called the generic absoluteness theorem. Here's one example. If M is a model of ZFC and they're arbitrarily large wooden cardinals, then the L of R of M is elementarily equivalent to the L of R of N. So statements about the reals, or even this somewhat larger class of statements, and well, sets of reals in L of R, they cannot be changed by, their truth values cannot be changed by set forcing in the presence of arbitrarily large wooden cardinals. Okay, that's so there are no independence results by the method we know. And that seems to correspond with the fact that we can use arbitrarily large wooden cardinals to decide in a practical sense all of the descriptive set theory of the sets of reals, all the classical open questions about L of R that had been asked. Okay, so practical completeness seems to correspond to this mathematical criterion of generic absoluteness. Okay, now we encounter the Lévy-Solovay boundary. What if we try to go beyond the simply definable sets of reals? And the first statement we encounter is the first big one in set theory, Cantor's continuum hypothesis. So none of our current large cardinal axioms decide CH. And that's because they're preserved by small forcing, as forcing of size less than the large cardinal. But CH can be made both true and false by such forcings. So because CH is provably not generically absolute, it cannot be decided by large cardinal hypotheses that are themselves generically absolute. Moreover, I should add, our current large cardinal hypotheses are generically absolute. Okay. So large cardinal hypotheses live in the realm of generically absolute statements. CH is not in the realm of generically absolute statements. It's out of it. And the theorem that says that is Lévy-Solovay. And given one of the current axioms, A, you can find set generic extensions within a universe with satisfying A that satisfy CH, and the other one satisfy not CH. CH is what's called a sigma 2-1 statement. It says there exists a set of reals, namely a well ordering, with some simple properties involving quantification over reals. So there exists a set of reals, and then the remaining quantifiers are over reals themselves. So it's it's the simplest logical form of a generically not absolute statement. And there are many, many, many more of them in general set theory, Susslin's hypothesis, all sorts of them. Okay, so what to do? One response is to try to find non-generically absolute sets, statements that we have some reason to believe are true, and use them to decide CH. And like the forcing axioms, they decide CH. They're not generically absolute because they decide CH. That does not correspond to claiming the consistency strength hierarchy or the interpretability hierarchy. Let's see what the interpretability hierarchy, what if we stick to the generically absolute, in other words? Okay, so as I said before, large cardinal hypotheses are co-final in the part of the interpretability hierarchy we know about. But like ZFC itself, they are set forcing invariant, or generic absolute. So they cannot decide CH and the many other statements that are not set forcing invariant. Can we isolate a sublanguage of the language of set theory in which the mathematics based on set forcing invariant or generically absolute principles can be carried out? In other words, what if we say our domain is meaning is the generically absolute? What do we get? Well, turns out you can give a precise formalization of a language and an open-ended theory which captures this. It's the multiverse language. It has the usual syntax of set theory with two sorts. One for the worlds and one for the sets. Let me not read the axioms. The basic idea is, let's just remove the idea of a reference universe. Let's think of all of our set generic extensions as being on the same footing, and think of sort of the equivalence class of all of the universes that we can get to by set forcing or generic refinement, because they can get to us by set forcing. There's a loose analogy to special relativity. You remove the idea of absolute space and time and just look at the class of inertial frames, and you say physics is about that. Okay, so let's generically absolute set theory is what you can say in the multiverse language. Okay, that's. Now, you can pass between the multiverse language and the standard language. It's a sublanguage of the standard one. So the natural way to get a model of MV is as follows. You start with a transitive model of CFC, and now we produce a collection of generic extensions by forcing over M, collapsing all of its ordinals to be countable, and take the worlds of the multiverse generated by G to be those that we get to as the form M of G alpha, somewhere along the way of that process of forming these universes, or generic refinements of those universes. So that produces one of these equivalence classes that's closed under generic extension and refinement. Okay, and now in our language, our language and theory, the multiverse theory that I skipped over giving the details of, that theory is true in this, this multiverse MG. So that gives us an interpretation of the multiverse language in the standard one. And it's the intended interpretation, at least the interpretation I intended. This is not, it's a made up language. It was made up to isolate generically absolute set theory in a convenient way. And in a way that you could say in few words, that's what it is. So this interpretation is, I would say, is true by fiat. You can question whether generically absolute set theory, as identified by this definition, is an interesting subtheory of set theory. Certainly question that. Maybe there's something way beyond it, or maybe this is an artificial restriction. But let's look at. Okay. So let me skip over some technicalities. What I'm getting at is there's a way of translating. There's a recursive translation function that translates the multiverse language into the standard one. T of phi, phi's a multiverse statement. Then T of E is the standard statement, which just says phi is true in the multiverse in some or equivalently all multiverses obtained from me. So it's important that the forcing that produces the multiverse is what you call homogeneous. So the first order theory of this collection of worlds is actually present in the ground model. So that's why we can say true in some, equivalently all. It's because of the symmetry of the forcing. Okay, so there's this translation. And now, if you have, if you start with the multiverse language and theory, you can just prove that for any world in your multiverse, there is, in some generic extension, a G such that your multiverse is the multiverse of that world. So if we start with a multiverse W and a world M, there's a G such that W is the multiverse generated by G and M. Okay, so assuming the multiverse language, assuming the multiverse theory just indicates that we're using the multiverse language in such a way that T will be a valid translation. Okay, another point on the side, everything that can be said in the multiverse language can actually be said with just one world quantifier. It's equivalent. You can formulate your sentence as all worlds have some standard set theoretic property. Okay, so we have this restricted language. It captures the generically invariant statements because we can just add them in the form every world satisfies the statement. And in fact, it consists of just the generically invariant ones because every statement is equivalent to all worlds can be put in the form all worlds satisfy one of the standard ones. Okay, so by adding large cardinal hypotheses to the MV, we get theorems of the form for all worlds W, phi super W, and all the phis in the theory of the concrete that they generate. On the other hand, there's no obvious way that you could capture CH in the multiverse language. In fact, you can't. It's not generically absolute. So you'd have to distort its meaning somehow. Maybe just say, oh, what you used to say was CH. There was something vague. I'm going to sharpen the meaning by formulating some CH prime in the multiverse language, which captures what you ought to have meant and removes the ambiguity in your statement. Okay, now let me pause to, there's a passage in Maddie and Meadows, which I think is productive to reply here. So they write, why wouldn't it be sufficient to isolate a set of axioms that captures this central idea well enough, I think it's the multiverse idea, to generate a mathematically successful theory? even if it wasn't complete for some natural collection of toy models. Without a satisfactory answer to this question, we have no reason to adopt the axiomatizability requirement, and we're left without a principled argument for amalgamation. So I think there's a clarification I should make here. I think I've already sort of made it. I didn't maybe say this clear enough in the paper. I made it, and I think in the last few slides, but let me repeat. The object was to capture an existing success, generically invariant set theory, developed in the standard language with epsilon. But in order to isolate it, LMV and its translation seem useful. Amalgamation is true under this translation. Moreover, it records or captures the intention that you will be translatable via T into L epsilon. It's not meant as an independent insight into the nature of multiverses. I don't have any independent insights or interest, or I say any independent ideas about what multiverses look like. It's there to clarify how we want to be understood. We want to be understood as using the language of set theory, but just the generically invariant part. Okay, so now what could be wrong with that? Well, you're using a sublanguage. Maybe you lost something. Maybe you've lost interpretive power, expressive power. We were supposed to maximize interpretive power. Are we doing that? Okay, well, you can think of the standard language as the multiverse language together with a constant symbol for a reference universe. Statements like CH, as used by the people who, in the standard language, who think that it has some meaning, are intended as statements about that reference universe. So the question is, to what extent is this constant symbol meaningful? Does one lose anything by retreating to the superficially less expressive multiverse language? Distinguish three answers. The weak relativist thesis: every proposition can be expressed in the every proposition that can be expressed in the standard language can be expressed in the multiverse language. Multiverse language is semantically complete within the standard language. The strong absolutist thesis is nope. The constant symbol makes independent sense. It is not expressible in the multiverse language. Okay, now these are both theses in philosophy or epistemology. They're meta-theses about the meaning of the language of set theory. There's another thesis which I probably should not have put in on the same footing because it's a statement in the language of set theory. Finally, weak relativism and the absolutist idea of distinguished reference world can be combined. Perhaps not good to say that, in that there is an individual world that's definable in the multiverse language. So maybe even when you stick to the multiverse language, you can define a reference universe. An elementary forcing axiom shows that if you can do that, then that definable world has to be the smallest one. It's the core, the unique one that's included in all the others. Okay, so the weak absolutist thesis is that the multiverse has a core. It's consistent with the other two. It's on a different plane, actually. It's about the sets, not the semantics of set theory. But the two semantic sort of opinions could probably both have some perhaps feel good about this one, maybe. Okay, why weak relativism? Well, because it seems that the theory we've developed so far can be naturally expressed in the multiverse sublanguage. It's generically absolute. Perhaps an independent understanding of this constant V dot will be useful someday, but at the moment we don't see how. The weak relativist thesis can be considered just as a piece of advice. Don't go looking for this way of using V dot. Okay, let me pause to give some replies to Maddie Meadows. They say the substance of Steele's thought can be formulated more effectively in philosophically innocent mathematical terms. By these means, we steer away from the vagaries of mathematical meaning, truth, and existence, and toward the methodologically central questions. How do we exactly do we select our theories, and by what right? Okay, so I would reply, I think you probably know the reply by now. We select our theories based on how they're interpreted. Our framework theory should be such that all others can be translated into it. Paraphrasing Hilbert, depriving the philosopher of the notion of meaning is like depriving the boxer of the use of his fists. I don't know, you may know this quote of Hilbert. He said, depriving a mathematician of the law of the excluded middle is like depriving a boxer of the use of his fists. I don't know if I would say that about, really say that, but it just seemed like I should put this quote in. The notion of meaning, philosophers have used it, maybe we use it in real life. I don't think it's such a dirty thing. Okay, this leads them to formulate the distinction between weak and absolutism weak relativism and strong absolutism in different way. They have two imaginary set theorists, the universe theorist and the multiverse theorist. So the universe theorist speaks the standard language, is trying to just figure out whether CH is true or false. Suppose he's making a mistake. The multiverse theorist thinks he's making a mistake. According to the multiverse theorist, no candidate theory in the multiverse is preferable to any other. Multiverse theorist speaks the language of multiverse theory. Multiverse theorist thinks have considerable justification that the universe theorist is just missing the fact that all candidate foundational theories are represented by words in the multiverse have equal standing. Okay, I would say too many things to fit into the remaining 5 minutes. The point was not really to compare foundational theories that are represented in the multiverse. It was to find a common core on which they all agree, not really to compare them. So it wasn't like, let me present an arena in which you can all argue. It was like, let me show you all this stuff you agree on. Maybe in fact you agree on everything. Okay, so there's too much here really, but there's another way of putting the distinction between multiverse, between relativism and absolutism. It has to do with talking about the objects themselves and making the virtue impartiality. Let's skip reply number 1. I would say the main reply number 2 is the question for both of these universe and multiverse theorists is, does the multiverse have a core? If you agree, that's a theorem, that's a statement in your common language. You both agree that has meaning. If you agree that it does, then the question for the universe theorist is your V the core? It's hard to see how the universe theorist could think that there's a V, that there is a core, but it's not V, because then there's going to be a forever undetermined question in how your V is related to the core. Your V is not definable in the multiverse. So you're not going to be able to say your V is the one that is obtained in this. I mean, you could say it's obtained by a certain class of forcings, but not some particular forcing. So it seems like if you're a strong absolutist and you admit that V as a core, you're going to go towards V has a core. It's hard to see another position. And then once the two of them have agreed on that, then they can translate their languages one to the other, and it doesn't really matter which syntax you use. So there's no important disagreement if they agree on that. Another comment to make is that weak relativism and strong absolutism are views on the semantics. They're not expressible in the language. Weak absolutism is expressible, in fact, in both languages. Okay, now we're running out of time and we're coming to the last third of the talk. So let me go very fast. Can I have like 5 minutes? So 5 minutes, okay? Okay, 5 minutes from 4:30. Okay, so whatever one thinks of semantic completeness of the multiverse language, putting things this way brings the weak absolutist thesis, that is that there's a core, to the fore as a fundamental question. So just packaging things this way does have a value. As I said, this is a question for everyone. The strong absolutist and because it's in everybody's language. Now, neither MV nor its extensions by large cardinal hypotheses up to the level of supercompacts and beyond decides whether there's a core to the multiverse. Sorry, up to the level of supercompacts, it doesn't decide whether there's a core. And it doesn't decide the basic theory of the core if there is one. It's just as much a shrouded in mystery as arbitrary sigma 2-1 statements, because it can be varied by set forcing. Okay. However, there's this very pretty theorem by Usuba, who proved that if there's an extendable cardinal, then in fact there is a core. The generic multiverse has a core. To the extent that I'm not so confident that this is a long-term proof that there is a core, but because extendables, they have as a large cardinal hypotheses, they have a character that's somewhat different from the local ones, like measurables, huges, so on, and there's a class aspect to them, and that's important for this theorem. Okay, but be that as it may, accepting the universe as a core and there's an extendable cardinal, still we can't decide anything about the basic theory of that core. So it's all independent by set forcings. Okay, so that leads to the idea that even dropping down to the multiverse language and accepting that the universe has a core, there's still a meaning in determinacy. What is this core like? And a natural response is it's like a canonical inner model. Now, if I try to spell that out for you, we're going to go way over. The canonical inner models that are reasonable to look at, it turns out, are the Hodds of models of the axiom of determinacy. Now, our theory of the generically absolute, look at the second theorem. If they're arbitrarily large wooden cardinals, then this class of statements, sigma 2-1 Hom infinity, is generically absolute. That is the class of generically absolute statements, the sigma 2-1 Hom infinities. And those are realized in models of the axiom of determinacy. So if we look at our theory of the concrete, the reals and sets of reals, where we have generic absoluteness, it's in statements of this form. Okay, now those are realized in models of determinacy, but every model of ZF has a model of ZFC that's close to it. It's Hod. The Hodds of these models of determinacy, they're close to the models of determinacy themselves. There's this theorem of Wooden that they're sigma 2-1 correct. So they're the Hodds of those models of determinacy are capturing the generically absolute statements about reals and sets of reals. Moreover, those Hodds have large cardinals. They have wooden cardinals. Okay, so maybe that's the model for V, the V that removes our meaning indeterminacy and keeps our theory of the concrete that's generically absolute. it's the HOD of the determinacy model like this. Okay, so that leads us to the statement V equals ultimate L. So as they're arbitrarily large wooden cardinals, and V looks like the HOD of the determinacy model in a certain, in this way I've spelled out. V looks like the HOD of a determinacy model. Take it to be that. That axiom proves that V is the core of its own multiverse. So it's you don't need extendable cardinals. That axiom itself proves it. And it proves something else. V is the generically absolute HOD. Okay, so now the natural question is, if we adopt this axiom, have we restricted ourselves? And have we settled, actually removed the meaning indeterminacy? In other words, is it ultimate V? Is ultimate L ultimate, and is it like L? Okay, so we hope that it's consistent with all the large cardinals. Whether it's consistent with many wooden cardinals is open. We hope that it leads to a fine structure theory like the theory we get for the canonical intermodels, but that's open too. Okay, and the last slide is devoted to positive theorems, recent theorems along these lines that give you more reason to believe the answers to those things will be positive. We can reach basically the level of something called subcompacts, just below supercompacts, in HODs of determinacy models. And those HODs do have a fine structure that's like that of L. So this picture can be realized up through large cardinals at the level of subcompact cardinals. In other words, and that there's an iterability hypothesis behind that. It's a conditional theorem. We believe the hypotheses, at least many people, but it's a technical question not answered. Okay, so granted that hypothesis, V equals ultimate L is consistent with subcompacts and gives you a fine structure. The big open problems are, can you remove the iterability hypothesis? And can you replace subcompact by supercompact or stronger large cardinals? Let me just take two more, and I'll get to my final remarks here. Okay, so these big open problems, they're not new. They've been open for 25 to 50 years. They're central to intermodal theory. That people knew that they were really important long before any of this philosophy came about. Solving them, I would say solving them is the most important project in this neighborhood. So although it's nice to have your name as a project manager in the title, I'm not project manager to this project. This project existed back when Ben and I were in Vought's class. People knew that they wanted a canonical intermodal for supercompacts in 1970. Okay, progress has been made. It's not like it's a dead area by any means, but there's a long-running open problem. Okay. I would say that the viability of V equals ultimate L as an axiom expressed in either syntax requires positive answers to these questions. It can't be restrictive, and it should lead to a clarification, a fine structure. Just off to the side, I didn't get to mention the ultimate L conjecture. I would say that the viability of V equals ultimate L is not related to the ultimate L conjecture. At least the ultimate L conjecture could go down, and neither this axiom nor the fate of intermodal theory is imperiled. Okay, I think an important point, people use the word preferable or theories having equal standing. Adopting V equals ultimate L would not and should not mean that ending the further development of theories like the forcing axioms. It could be that the most interesting theories for foundations of analysis are the ones that hold in models of Martin's maximum. Could be that the theory of the core is kind of useless. I mean, I don't believe that, obviously, but that's not the question at issue. So In other words, what can be forced, what's true in other universes than the core, is of permanent interest in set theory. And there's a very pretty recent paper by Doug Blue called The Generic Multiverse is Not Going Away, which gives a whole set of examples of how people have used the generic multiverse to prove absolute theorems that are true in all universes of multiverse. It's a productive technique. Okay, so if it works out, I would say V equals L is a clarificatory V equals ultimate L is a clarificatory axiom, like the axiom of extensionality or the axiom of regularity. It tells you sort of what you're talking about. Extensionality says you're talking about sets, not properties. Regularity says you're talking about well-founded sets. Ultimate L is much more subtle. By the way, there's no predicate X belongs to ultimate L that's been identified yet. So part of developing the consequences is being able to formulate it in the form of the axiom of regularity, say, or you say every set has some property. It's a precise statement, but it's not a statement of the form every set has some property. Okay, if it works out, it's a clarificatory axiom. Transcending that framework would probably mean finding some large cardinal hypothesis that cannot hold in the hot of a determinacy model. For all we know, we have one, supercompacts, or even weaker ones, but probably not. Well, what the future will bring requires more investigation, which is probably the main point for any of this. Those are big open problems. They need more investigation. The mathematical structure will emerge, and the philosophy is going to need those results. Okay, thanks.
All right, let's thank John. It's supposed to be different. It's just in the garage. Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break. So it's 4:40 now. We'll come back at 4:45. If you'd like to ask a question, please put it in the chat. Just say that you've got a question in the chat. Just write question, and I'll come to you, and we'll have a discussion time. All right. So I'll take a quick break, and we'll reconvene soon. All right, who are we back? We should wait for Pen, obviously. But, see if people, sometimes people, yeah, people come. The screen's unblack when you talk. All right. Well, so people, if you could write questions as you have them over on in the chat, that would be great. But I'd like to start, if we can, with Pen.
There, if I can get myself going here. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, John. It was fun to run through these things and get your further thoughts in the interstices and so on. There's way too much to talk about, but so let me just say a couple things so that other people get a chance. I guess I have to say something about meaning, just for the record. John has been, John and I actually have been disagreeing about this for a very long time. And I remember for the same very long time, it started at the same time when he was telling me not to think so much about ontology. And eventually I came to see the wisdom of that. And so maybe I will eventually come to see the wisdom of his insisting on meaning, but so far I haven't. In the case of ontology, letting go of ontology did seem to simplify things in an important way. And I guess I feel like I'm on the other side of the meaning thing, because I think letting go of meaning also greatly simplifies things and clarifies things. So my thought is that if you're ready to admit that, ready to say that extrinsic considerations are the most important thing in epistemology here, then I'm not sure what the keep holding on to meaning is doing for you. All you really want to do is go for theories that have the best consequences and are the most powerful and fruitful and all that. Why does it matter whether they are contained in the meaning that we currently assign to the term? Why should that matter? Why should we care?
Well, I think there's the activity of extending the meaning as well. So,
well, but if extending the meaning is just taking it in a direction that's mathematically fruitful, then it comes to the same thing.
Maybe. That is, I would say the meaning is determined by the use. That's a slogan that could fit a lot of, you can fit a lot of things in. I would, but how the, I'm a holist, how your mathematical theory fits into all of the rest of what we know, and in particular, the rest of what we are really proud of knowing, like science. That is its meaning in a way. So the methodological considerations that that you raise, they're part of they're part of what, the fact that some consideration is relevant, that is partially determinative of the meaning. Another slogan was the meaning's the method of verification. So the methods are at least partially constitutive of the meaning.
Well, okay.
I don't pretend that I have an elaborate theory of meaning. I looked on the Stanford Encyclopedia. I saw 5 articles, surveying different approaches with long bibliographies to them. So it's not, and I certainly am not a master of any of that. And
what I've been trying to
it's kind of
convince
a
you.
placeholder in a way. When you talk about methodological considerations, I would talk about the meaning, I suppose.
Then maybe we're not really disagreeing.
Yeah,
If I'm saying that the main way that the way we go forward in selecting our theories is by extrinsic methods, we look and we see what's the most fruitful and powerful and effective theory, and you say, yeah, and that also is telling us what the meaning is, or telling us how best to extend our meaning.
Yeah.
And I say, fine, John, if that's the way you want to think about it,
okay.
but we don't really disagree, right?
Meaning is extrinsic. It's a property of languages, which are a property of social groups. It's determined by all of our interactions and how we use our signaling system. It's not something that's in, that part of it is not intrinsic to the, I don't know. That's all I have to say in that.
Okay.
Direction.
I think what I've been trying to convince you of over the years is that if you did go into those 5 different batches of theories that the Stanford Encyclopedia told you about in detail, it wouldn't help you.
Well, I did notice that there didn't seem to be much on meaning change in science. It seemed to be mostly about meaning in natural languages.
Right.
And so I'd be grateful actually if anybody could point to sort of nice philosophical analyses of meaning acquisition or meaning change in the more theoretical sciences.
Toby, could I just bring up one other thing before I turn over to everybody else? Another thing that really interested me, completely separate from meaning, is the thing you said at the end about how V equals ultimate L, if it works out, would be an axiom like extensionality or regularity. Because, and you were saying that those were axioms that tell us, or that sort of decide what we're talking about. We're going to talk about these things, which you might think of as a meaning statement of meaning, but let's leave that aside. And I would describe it as just slightly differently, which is that extensionality and regularity were axioms that we adopted because they're so simplifying and so clarifying. They make everything so much clearer in ways that we think don't leave out anything that we want.
Yeah, I could go with that.
And then that does seem to fit V equals ultimate L pretty well, right? It would be an axiom we would adopt because it really simplifies and clarifies and so on. We've got this beautiful fine structure and everything. And we don't think it's leaving anything out. So that does seem like a nice way to look at it.
Yeah. We don't know that it doesn't leave anything out, and those those big open problems
are about that.
Yeah.
Do you have any interest in the choiceless large cardinals?
Well, interest, yes. I haven't done any work on them myself. No, yeah. So you're probably getting at Reinhardt cardinals versus the ultimate L conjecture.
Yeah.
So,
but you don't. So you could disagree with the Harvard folks, and you don't think the ultimate L conjecture is crucial,
right? The weak evidence, very weak evidence, maybe is the Reinhardt cardinals are consistent.
Yeah.
It is very weak evidence, but and that would imply the ultimate L conjecture is false. But I don't think the ultimate L conjecture says that a certain method of constructing canonical inner models that satisfy V equals ultimate L can be proved to work from the existence of extendables. So there's a certain method that enters into this thing, and it has to provably work from extendables.
Right.
Okay, and we just don't know enough about inner models at that level to have any real opinion about it. It actually would have struck inner model theorists 20 or 25 years ago as probably not too good to be true, so to speak. That's not the way inner model theory is going. And then Hugh Wooden proved these really pretty theorems, which held it out as a possibility. But as he moved further and further, the theorem started seemed to be showing that, in fact, it's not true. In other words, he proved that this model construction method would give you an inner model that's you can prove is close to V in various ways.
Right.
There's something called covering.
Right.
Okay, that's people would not have guessed that you could prove from extendable cardinals that there's a model that's close to V and contained in hot. So that one would get that. But if you could construct one by this method, you'd get it.
Right.
And this is a method that had been used in the lower levels. There was a theater method in the lower levels.
Right.
The moral of that and later work could be just, well, this particular method gives out.
Right.
I would take that to be the most likely scenario. So it's not that you can't construct models of V equals ultimate L from, with extendable cardinals in them or whatever, but you just can't construct them by this method.
Got it. Thank you. I should let everybody else get a chance.
I think Schatz had a finger on this, so let's go over there.
Yeah, that was very interesting, and I kind of wanted to ask for a bit more clarification about how you see the V equals ultimate L in relation to these unproven conjectures. So would you also say that the truth of the hot hypothesis doesn't have a strong effect on the desirability of V equals ultimate L? Because it seems like the hot hypothesis is more central to whether ultimate L as an inner model does the things we want to do, as opposed to the L conjecture, which, like you said, just says we can generate these sorts of models in canonical ways.
Yeah. Okay. Now I don't have a opinion on the hot hypothesis. Remind me what the hypothesis is. You can prove from is it extendable cardinals that that Hod has covering properties? I think
the Hod hypothesis is that there is a proper class of regular cardinals lambda, which are not strongly measurable in Hod. And then it has all of those implications, if I recall correctly, about.
Well, there's something called the Hod dichotomy. And then there's the Hod hypothesis, which is the one side of the dichotomy. So Hod dichotomy is a theorem.
Yeah.
Which said it's roughly has a form either Hod is close to V or it's far from V. And then I believe the Hod hypothesis is that you can prove, I think, from extendable cardinals that it's close to V.
Yeah.
Maybe someone else can remember for sure. I mean, if that's what, if my memory is right and that's what it is, I'd say it's sort of in the same. I don't know. I don't think whether you can prove from extendables that Hod is close to V. I don't think you need to be able to do that in order to assert that Hod is close to V or that Hod is V.
John, could you undo your screen share so that we could see everybody? Would that be good?
Oh, yeah. Okay, how do I, sure. Let me see. Wait a minute.
I think you go up to the top, take your cursor up to the top.
Oh, stop share. Yes. Okay, there we go. Thank you.
Oh, there we are. Okay, there's everybody. Thank you. I'm sorry, Jeffrey, I didn't mean to interrupt your question.
No, but yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you very much.
Sure.
If I may jump in with a bit of terminology, there's the ultimate L conjecture. Wouldn't call it the ultimate L conjecture, which is a conjecture about provability, which is what John was referring to. He says, if there's an extendable cardinal, then you can prove, so this is a number theoretic statement, then you can prove that there's an inner model of that's close to V that satisfies V equals ultimate L.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if there's you can prove that if there's a measurable cardinal, there's a canonical inner model with a measurable cardinal. You can prove it, but you can't prove that there's one that's close to V. You look at the method by which you do prove that there is one, the construction method, and you sort of take it naively. Take it, if you, I don't want to use the word naively, if you take it in a natural way, up to the level of supercompact cardinals, then you prove this very beautiful theorem that you get a model that's close to V. So whereas at the measurable cardinal level, this called background construction method gives you one, provably gives you a model, but doesn't provably give you one close to V, and a model contained in HOD. I mean, it's important, the contained in HOD part is important. That's what's saying it's a canonical model, it's not V itself. Okay, so at the level of measurable cardinals, you can prove that if there's a measurable, then there's a canonical model contained in HOD. You just can't prove that it's close to V. If that same sort of construction method were working up to the level of supercompacts, you prove this very nice theorem that, unexpected, that you would get a model that's close to V. And what remained would be to show that you get a model that's canonical, contained in HOD. And that's the thing which sort of subsequently seems less and less likely.
All right, let's move to our next question. Rupert.
Thanks, Toby. I noticed that both Penelope Maddy and John Steele strongly emphasize extrinsic justifications. And I was just thinking, in the hypothetical scenario, what if there's some forcing fragile large cardinal axiom, like it's recognizably a large cardinal axiom, but it's not invariant under forcing, and it seems to have an intrinsic justification. And if it were to imply V equals ultimate L, if that were to happen, would you still say that intrinsic justifications don't do any justifying by themselves, like it all comes from the extrinsic evidence, or would the intrinsic justification count for something?
Okay, thanks. I'm glad you asked that question. It was a question that I wanted to say something about, the forcing fragile large cardinal axioms. Sort of to your particular question, it had several parts. Whether, if we found some forcing fragile large cardinal axiom that just seemed, just got to be true, and it decided, it could find one that decided CH. That would, nothing says you can't do that. It's not a large cardinal axiom of the sort that we know, because those are generically absolute, but maybe we find just this new idea, and then I would say that would be extremely interesting, and that axiom that bowled you over, and maybe other people should be heavily investigated in its relationships to all the others, and extrinsic evidence for it should be accumulated. And whether it actually led to that would be really the ultimate proof of the pudding. So, intrinsic justification does play a role sort of psychologically. That's how, you don't just investigate everything under the sun that might work out in the end. Okay, so that's why I'd say about the intrinsic justification. The other thing about forcing fragile, there's an important point here, that is making generic absoluteness sort of the criterion for being set generic absoluteness being the criterion for being a large cardinal axiom there's an assumption there that that the natural way of climbing the consistency strength hierarchy, when we get to these levels that we're not anywhere near yet, will still involve set generically absolute principles. It may not. So they may be forcibly fragile if that world, which is pretty far from where we are now, I think, but if that world comes to pass, then there'll be some bigger context, not generically absolute set theory, but the sort of set theory that you get when you've climbed that far. That'll be a bigger context. So what the multiverse language and the restriction to generically absolute set theory is doing, it's marking out an area that we sort of understand now, with many dark patches, like whether the ultimate L can actually have supercompacts or the like in it. So it's marking out this area. That area has already got a lot of dark spots. There could be stuff beyond it that's not generically absolute and is still sort of part of that one true hierarchy. That could certainly be the case, and then that would be very interesting. But it's not something that's like, I don't think it's something that's likely to happen soon.
Penn had a Penn had a follow up on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm pleased to hear John give that answer to the question about intrinsic justifications, because it's exactly what I would have said.
Mm-hmm.
It could turn out that there was this thing that seemed very intuitive and kind of cool, but if it didn't have the right extrinsic payoffs, we'd say, gee, that's a shame, and that would be that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm sorry. Things like intrinsic justifications, they seem more powerful at moments like when Cantor and Zermelo and all were at work, where you've gotten into an area where intuitions would apply. It was not so built up. If you had the right intuitions, they would carry you a long way.
Well, I mean, it's good to have these intuitions. They do carry you along when you don't know what to do. But Zermelo didn't trust them either. He was a fan of extrinsic justifications.
Oh, know that.
Yeah.
All right, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, John, for the talk. Maybe you've just touched on some of this stuff, but it was to do with a comment you made near the start that I wanted to kind of hear more about. I wondered if you could say a bit more about the sense in which I think you said extrinsic evidence today means self-evidence tomorrow. There's like, I don't know, a bunch of extrinsic evidence that V isn't L. So presumably, eventually, it's like obvious that V isn't L. But I was thinking then, say you get a bunch of results that consist of evidence for V equals ultimate L, then eventually it's supposed to be somehow obvious that V isn't L, but it's also obvious that V is kind of like L in certain structural respects, and presumably then that it's obviously not like L in some other respects, maybe. So I felt like we've lost a bit of what we meant by self-evident at that point. So maybe there are just results that count as extrinsic, and that's all they'll ever be, even if they're good ones. I don't know. It didn't feel like, for example, that kind of evidence that I just described, that would eventually be described as self-evidence, is the same kind of self-evidence that people usually ascribe to things like extensionality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. I don't want to make a heavy emphasis on the distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic evidence. That's sort of part of people who like the extrinsic, is they tend to think that the distinction isn't that interesting. In terms of today's extrinsically evident is tomorrow's intrinsically. I was thinking over longer periods of time, and so over longer periods of time, humans certainly we will become more intelligent, or we'll program our descendants to believe all sorts of things, probably just wire it in. And those things will be self-evident to them. Our own selves have evolved over long periods of time, but we talk to each other, and what's self-evident to even a graduate student is going to change over the time that you instruct them. So that's the kind of, there's some process in which things that really work out become more and more central. People hold to them more and more strongly. And if they're, sometimes people promote them to a status called self-evident. And I think that, that could happen with V equals ultimate to L. I don't know. It has this, to me, it has a feeling of a clarificatory axiom like V equals WF. V ever says well-founded. So, what it would constitute really to believe V equals ultimate L would be not to go looking beyond ultimate L or in its generic extensions for new mathematics. And I think that could be sort of become ingrained. I don't know if you would call it self-evident, but it could become sort of very much the norm.
Thanks.
All right. I might ask a question then. So I wanted to come back to the specific part of the talk where we were talking about your amalgamation axiom. I was curious about this. So I think what we were puzzled as to how to motivate it from the first principles that we drove the paper along with.
Mm-hmm.
And you've given a response which I think is interesting, but I suppose why not just toss it out? I mean, so if you throw amalgamation out, the theories are still equiconsistent. So it still seems like the MV minus amalgamation is still a plausible theory for generic invariance. It doesn't have the niceness, so I take very seriously, like it's definitely a useful tool, and you get this very nice sub language. So I think when we say that you're left without a principled argument, I mean, I suppose it comes down to what a principled argument is, but I suspect what we were concerned with is it didn't seem to, we got, adding the generic extension and generic refinement just seems straightforward. They seem to be what a theory of generic invariance should have in it. Amalgamation seems to be something else. We put it in there, and I agree that the reasons it makes everything work. It just rings like a bell. Everything just goes perfectly once that's in there, and without it, it's a bit of a loose fit. But I think that's what we were getting at with the the principled argument side of things. I mean, I don't know, Penn might want to interject at some point on that. But I was wondering if you could say a bit more about that.
Well, you could leave it out, but why leave it out if it's true under your intended interpretation? And it was true under the interpretation of that language that I understood. I don't know, I don't understand an interpretation of that language where it's not true. I just don't.
So you mean if we use but it was, for example, if the intended interpretation had been wouldn't.
Wait, you froze. Let's see.
We know it wouldn't work there.
Oh, wait. So
seems like, I mean, that seems like a generic.
Sorry, you froze. My feed here froze. Can you say that again?
Sorry.
It's probably my fault.
Yeah, I'll say it again. So it's probably mine as well. I'm in the garage. Anyway. So your intended interpretation is the MG. So we collapse the universe and then we tidy up from there. But there is another one on the market, which is Hughes, and it seems like a reasonable way of thinking about generic invariance as well. It doesn't have a theory that works. And this comes back to this semantic, having something like a completeness theorem. So we want a nice representation theorem between the theory and the class of models that we're considering. I'm not sure there are easy answers here. I just want to push it a little bit.
I would say something about intended interpretation at this point. I don't think that talking about models in the sense that Hugh and Hampkins and so on talk about them is giving an interpretation. In the sense that we want to consider it. You give an interpretation of your language by translating it into a language you understand, or think, or parts of which you understand. And I don't see any translation. I don't.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, they're not mutually interpretable.
So,
so maybe it could push a little.
The family of all countable models why not just second order arithmetic or ZF C plus all sets are countable? That's a good family that's a good theory of the family of all countable models. That's the model I can think. That's the theory I can think of ZFC plus all sets are countable, and all those objects, the models of ZFC and their countable models and their generic extensions, they're all there for you to look at. It's not a framework. Sure. Okay, so I was trying to isolate a sublanguage of our standard language and a theory that's true under our standard way of thinking about things. And that's, the generically absolute fragment of set theory. Under that interpretation of the multiverse language, amalgamation's true. Moreover, it's an important, the first thing you'd ask if you're in that language is amalgamation true? And if you say no, then you've got to say, well, something else. What is the structure that you're looking at? So if you say yes, then you said, and the other axioms, then you've really said what you're talking about, because you're translatable into a language that we've been using for a long, long time, like 100 years anyway, and has many connections with other things. You're on much firmer ground.
Could I jump in here? I'm having trouble understanding what the sort of large scale setup is. So you start out with the language with the two-sorted language with worlds and with worlds and sets, but that syntax is uninterpreted. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so it means nothing. And so you set up now this translation function, or you can't call it a translation function because you're starting from just, bare syntax. So you set up just a function that takes that language into the language of set theory, which is interpreted.
I didn't, I'm a set theorist. I started in the language of set theory. I tried to, and I listened to what my colleagues say, and they talk about generically absolute things all the time. In fact, it seemed like, well, that's pretty much all you're talking about.
Okay, we're talking about.
So
Right.
let me try to draw this this ring about what you've been saying and isolate it. And then if you try, if you try to do it in the standard language, it's just comes out weird. You're talking about Boolean values in complete Boolean algebras. It's more natural to think about the syntax of the multiverse language if you're in this context.
It's more natural to say, so I'm sitting in set theory and I'm trying to isolate this sublanguage.
Mm-hmm.
So I come up with a uninterpreted syntax. It's just squigs at that point. I make a function from that into my the language I'm speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time grasping why that should have any significance. Why what it carves out should.
It's not everything. The range is not everything. The range of your.
Well, I understand that's not everything, but why should that range be important in any way if it's just that I had some arbitrary syntax and I made an arbitrary function that might map to that set? Why does that that set important?
Yeah, sure. If it just did that arbitrarily.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Where I'm getting wrong here.
Well, the thing is, I sort of knew what the range we wanted. It was the generically absolute.
If you already knew what the range is, why bother? Why not just?
So, in order to point it out to everybody.
Can you see what's puzzling me here?
I think you're sort of reading more into this operation of people. Let's see. You isolate classes of objects because they're interesting, and yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure actually. I think sort of the gap between us is basically that you probably had thought about multiverses before and sort of independently of set theory, not as a set theorist. So that wasn't really my starting point. My starting point was ordinary set theory, and the question was, could you trim down its language so as to possibly avoid some meaning indeterminacy? The starting point was ordinary set theory. There was no independent idea of multiverses.
Well, I'm trying to get into that frame of mind by thinking of the multiverse language as being completely uninterpreted syntax, which seems like the right way to think of it from your point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm just stuck with this same question that I keep asking, that what is accomplished by taking some uninterpreted syntax and mapping it into your language that you understand? Why should that tell you anything about the language that you understand?
Well, that in itself,
I think maybe the answer is it doesn't tell you anything new.
Yeah.
But then I wonder, why did we bother?
In order to separate out CH from the generically absolute statements in a way, not just CH, but all the others.
Yeah, all the others.
In a user-friendly way.
I see. Okay.
When you do this, though, I don't know if I see LMV. I don't think we brought any multiverses. I mean, if I to the table when we were thinking about this, but if you're looking to try and capture to try and isolate the generically invariant sub-theory of L epsilon, the two natural axioms to add are forcing generic extension and generic refinement, which you do. But they're obvious, right? And so maybe my thought was that once you add amalgamation, the theory just gets so tidy and so natural that you just you just have to take it up. But I don't know if you get this sort of deep in principles. I mean, it fits that nice model you've got, but there are, you know, yeah. So that's the bit I'm curious about. I mean,
I mean, Hugh, you mentioned Hugh's multiverse, which is all countable. Well, Hugh's multiverse is not actually well defined, and not to fault Hugh, because I don't think he was actually, you know, he was trying to make arguments against it. It's not so, you know, Hugh's multiverse, he starts with a countable model, and then you look at the collection of all generic extensions. There's no specification of which countable model you're starting with. Okay, so it's not actually well defined, and you don't want to like start with a minimal model of ZFC or anything like that. What you want to do is start with a countable elementary submodel of the true V, and then look at all of its generic extensions. Well, that's sort of equivalent, except to what I'm doing, except that or it's not equivalent, but anyway, it's in the same vein, except I don't want to talk about truth in V. You don't have to. Okay. So the other, see, there's another point there. Well, I guess that's the main point. Is you start out saying, I want to talk about what can be forced. Okay, and given any two complete Boolean algebras, I can force something that's generic for the product of them. And I don't really care what the individual generic objects are. So I can form a collection of universes where I've got generics for those two, and then I have a generic extension which absorbs them both. Okay, yep. So if I sort of start with the point of view of ordinary set theory and complete Boolean algebras, then I can find a way of thinking about all of the generic extensions that in which amalgamation is true.
Okay. All right, I think we have a finger on that, and that will probably be our last question. That's Ainsley, sorry. Yeah.
I knew what you were talking about. Yeah, so thanks for the talk. I was wondering then if, I guess, to come from this more like Hamkin's almost like pluralist multiverse approach, then if really you're picking out even just some particular universe, and that universe is the generic absolute universe. And I guess I just probably don't know quite enough about generic absoluteness for like why we then like would refer to that as a multiverse rather than just saying that we're fixing that. But yeah, is that a reasonable way to characterize the project, which then maybe makes it, then we get a better sense of what exactly you're trying to do, right? Which is to capture this particular setting where most set theory that you're witnessing is occurring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the project. It's not, embracing alternate universes was not the goal, so Hamkin sort of is coming from a different direction completely, and I don't think that, I semi-regret the fact that I even used the word multiverse, but it does seem to, it conveys some fair amount that it was efficiently. But I'm not, to me, I haven't studied Hampkin's papers in great detail, but there doesn't seem to be a proposed framework theory for everything, for set theory. There's no proposed framework theory that's any different from the standard one, as far as I can tell. There's a lot of talk about how non-standard models are interesting. Yes, they're interesting. We can study them, and within the framework. It's not the project or the goal that I think of when I think of strengthening our foundation. What can be forced is interesting. That's true, and we can embrace models as real, if whatever that is. But it's the proof of the pudding is a formal theory in a language. That's what we got in 1908 or in that area. It was a huge step forward, and that's the line that I think most modern set theory at the upper reaches is trying to push further, strengthen that foundation. So.
Right. Well, we might close the session. I think a few of us will stick around for a little while, but other than that, let's thank John one more time. Maybe we could, yeah, we can clap.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
For your attention. Yeah.
That is a weird sensation when people suddenly start to disappear like that.
We're down to 4 now. Okay. The hardcore.
Yeah.
You guys,
Have you met Ainsley Penn? I'm not sure if you have. Ainsley's arrived in the US from Australia, which is quite a difficult feat at the moment.
Yeah, so she was telling us.
what are you into, Ainsley?
So I guess I'm kind of redefining that a little bit at the moment. When Toby was in Australia, I actually did my my honors, so kind of like a bachelor thesis with him, which was on one of Friedman's kind of concrete mathematical statements, which is undecidable in ZFC.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did my master's in Munich, which was on the reverse mathematics of game theory. So showing that there are kind of these fundamental mathematical assumptions when you set up your theory in a particular way that you might want to watch out for because they have unintended consequences. And so, yeah, now, you know, that I'm back at an institution with Toby, like maybe it will be more, I guess not like classical set theory, but like set theory as it is traditionally understood. Or I might see how much of that kind of computability.
Yeah. Is there anybody in computability there you can talk to? Because
I don't think so. I think mainly I would, message people at Berkeley probably. But yeah, like in the way as well that, Friedman's large cardinal stuff, right, had still implications back to the undecidability of that FC and within, ordinary mathematics, as we like to call it. I think like that's still an interesting way of looking at certain things.
Well, Matt is surely interested in trying to get consequences of set theoretic things for ordinary mathematics, right? That stuff on ergodic theory.
Yeah, right. I don't know how successful.
That one,
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to use them on Wall Street, was he?
Well, that was after he came back from Wall Street, I think, or at least not the same thing. Well, how's the logic group at Berkeley doing?
Well, I don't have contact anymore with the logicians beyond the three set theory. Well, there are two graduate students in set theory. Benny was here earlier, David Casey, and then Gabe Goldberg, Hughes.
Yeah, I heard he was on a postdoc with you now.
Yeah. And so we meet, and Gabe did some work with Farmer and on Reinhardt cardinals. So we've been talking about that.
Right.
We haven't met nearly as much as we did back when you could meet in person, sadly. I think we may start doing it more, but I don't know. There was something about being in that old system that had momentum, and once it was broken, it seemed to me easier just to do my own thing.
Yeah.
So there's that, I must say, there's a recursion theory seminar. I think it's still going. Probably, it has to be Zoomed. So, there's, I think, reverse mathematics makes its appearance there pretty often. So, could probably go attend that.
Yeah, it's. There are many downsides, but the upside to this is you get to attend a lot of stuff that you wouldn't have been able to attend.
Yeah.
For example, Schatz has been keeping up with us, from Norway, as if it was not a problem.
So, do you have a sort of regular online seminar?
I have a little group that meets weekly. Yeah, a few. Well, now it's really only 3 students and me, but then sometimes it's 5, and then there are a couple other hangers on, depending on the subject matter. But yeah, but eventually this fades, I assume. Well, like you said, you now feel like why not just do what you feel like doing yourself? And I guess I will reach that point, but I still have students now.
Yeah.
This? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask if this talk was sort of what you're going to give to Juliet, do you think?
Are
you going to give up on Juliet? That would be okay.
She hasn't been bothering me. I thought I was going to write this paper and then give the talk. And then Toby said I didn't have to write the paper in order to give the talk. And now the paper is, I don't know what's going in the paper. I got a lot more chance to think about this kind of thing. So I probably should start writing it right now. But I had a experience with the technical part, the theorem I talked about at the end, which I proved it like I thought 4 or 5 years ago. It had all been written up, a long manuscript for going to Cambridge University Press last spring. And like 1 week before it was going to go into print, I found an error.
Oh.
And I was friend, okay, this, it's can't be too bad. I couldn't fix it, and I couldn't fix it, and it took like 2 or 3 weeks of really, I'd written a whole bunch of papers depending on this, but it was right at the beginning. So okay, those were terrible. But I saw how to fix it, and then I have to integrate it into the book. But as I'm doing that, I've discovered another error. This one only took like a week to fix, but also very anxious. Okay, now it's fixed. But the trouble is that these fixes, and now it's stable. But the trouble is these fixes, they affect the beginning definitions. So now you've got a 350-page manuscript, and you've got to make changes at the beginning, and they're just going to filter everywhere. Okay, so I've been doing that since August and doing it like every day.
Uh-huh.
Also trying, the changes multiply complexity, and it's already complicated. So you want to fight that. You want to make it readable. Okay, so there's that part of it. Anyway, that's all I do, and unless people really rang me to write a paper, I'm not going to do it until I'm done. She hasn't actually done that yet.
Well, you aren't alone in not having sent something in. So I think I don't know when, maybe she's just given up in despair. I've seen about 8 or 9 papers at this point, maybe 10.
I'm going to write one when she says, usually there's a warning of this is the last call.
This is it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now or never.
That warning gives you a month or so anyway.
Okay. Whatever you have then, you'll see.
Something I can write in a month. I could write what we have here. I could write in a month. So it will come to the top of my stack when Julia says, I'm calling time.
So is this thing, this reference number 3, normalizing iteration trees, is that the book manuscript?
Yeah, that was an earlier form of it. There are some corrections to that are online. All the main ideas of the corrections are online. And, yeah, that's it.
But that's the thing you've been.
That's the thing I've been
struggling with. I mean, part of it is, you try to change the definitions in such a way that the things further down the line don't have to be changed so much. And so anyway. As opposed to just writing them the way you would if you were starting from scratch.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
And the other thing, I think of Tony often. Tony in his book.
Yes. Tony in his book.
He just held it too long, and it started looking out of date, and he just didn't want to. It never happened. So
never happened.
I'm scared. That's kind of a caution to me that I shouldn't stop. I shouldn't just let. I don't want that to happen.
No. There's also volume 2 of Aki's. Sorry.
Tony's book is still everywhere, so everyone uses it.
Has it changed at all in?
My version has 2 chapter 4s, which is, but I used it a lot ages ago. Yeah, I mean, I still teach with it. It's great for that material.
Yeah, he's a great writer.
Yeah.
That's a shame. Do you know whatever happened with Aki's volume 2?
I didn't know there was going to be
yeah, there was going to be there was a time he once said he promised me that there would be volume 2 at the turn of the millennium. And then he explained that was not at 2000, that was at 2001. So we had the extra year, but it's been a while. So I guess that's not going to happen either. There were chapters to that. I saw chapters to that.
Oh,
so this revised his set theory book. There's a pretty new version of that. That was a while ago.
Yeah, I think that was the Millennium in edition.
It was 2003, that one.
2003.
Coonan redid his.
Yes, but he really redid it. Yeah.
Well, both of them are different too, I think. I mean,
that's true.
That's true. The earlier ones both have this nice story to them, and then they become reference books in their
and then become compendia. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Coonan's book I thought was great, and I haven't seen the new version. Is it much different?
It spends a lot more time looking at like different cardinal, these properties of the continuum and forcing the different cardinals that's cardinal inequalities, things like that. But it's still great. But it's less. You can get more lost in the trees as you go through it, I think. I mean, I didn't read it cover to cover like I read the original.
I think some people still prefer the original for teaching out of.
Yeah, Toby's teaching out of
1980.
Just
The 1980 version, yeah, it has a cleanliness to it.
It's a nice line. You get to a nice place at the end, and
Yeah,
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought the main problem was with there were no complete Boolean algebra, not enough about complete Boolean algebras enforcing, which for a basic text there should have been a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very thin on that bit. Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, so those are all really old books, some updated. Nobody's trying to just write a new one, I guess.
Well, John.
No.
We're also using your iterated ultra power notes when we do. They're great. What's the story of those? Did someone write them up? Because I get
Yeah, well, I gave a lecture series in, I think it was Beijing, unless, no, maybe in Singapore.
Yeah.
Part of Hugh and Ted's series of meetings. And one of the nice things about those series was people would just offer to write things up for you. So I had handwritten notes, and someone just teched them up and added diagrams, and so that's where it came from.
They're nice and swift, though. You get a long way in very quickly, which is good for students, I think. 'Cause inner model theory is quite busy. Yeah.
This is the lecture notes, the yellow book.
No, this is just a set of notes, I think. Right?
Yeah, they're on your website too. Yeah.
You know,
I see.
I don't know if you're going to get to this detail, or the proof that GCH holds in L of a coherent sequence has a gap or something wrong with it.
Oh, okay. We'll look up that.
So yeah, try to find it. But part of the reason it's not been made more, well, anyway,
Sure.
if I ever actually made it more into a finished product, I would correct that.
Sure.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
thanks so much, John. It's really good to see you.
So, yeah,
Yeah, thanks.
just to have this chance to get
Yeah.
reacquainted.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Philosophy again.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll probably be in touch if Juliet ever starts harassing you about this again.
Right. I guess you could whisper in her ear if you want to be mean to me.
Oh, I don't want to do that. That's not.
Okay.
Actually, I might write to you about just some little things in the slides.
Okay.
Would that be
That's
just
great.
little things?
Yeah,
There.
sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks
Okay.
a lot.
Good night all.
Good night, all. Good to meet you, Ainsley.
Yeah.